Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. Welcome back to the main podcast on a Monday. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. Spotify, Apple, give us a review. Be nice to us, please. We're feeling vulnerable after yesterday, after Sunday. Before we do that, George, because we have a lot to break down. Firstly, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good, mate. Yeah, I'm not too bad. We were just talking.
We had a bit of a mix-up with the time. So because we've changed to daylight. Is it daylight saving?
I think it's daylight savings. Yeah.
And I just forgot to tell George. I was like, so he woke up and was like, "Oh, where are we going?" Anyway,
well, I don't know any listeners that are foreign. Like, it doesn't happen at the same time for everybody.
I thought it did. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, my time zone's different, I guess, than England's. Shock, but
my bad.
But yeah, no, it was okay. I got an early morning start. I got some stuff ready, fed the dog, did some laundry, and had some breakfast.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Ready to talk Arsenal.
Absolutely.
Do you want a funny stat?
Hit me.
Manchester United have only been on the receiving end. We've got to cheer ourselves up in some way. Of 9 90th minute winning goals in the Premier League.
Wow.
Okay. Not only 9 90th minute winning goals in the Premier League. How many of those were in Eric Ten Hag's 85 matches in charge?
I'm even going to go ridiculous statistic. 30%. So 2 or 3 out of the 9.
7.
That's wild. Wow. I didn't expect that.
I'm joyous, George, but I don't think I should be. We'll come to Ten Hag later. We are recording like just after the news has dropped. So we're kind of in a sort of giddy, it hasn't worked, but also, oh dear, what's coming next kind of tailspin here. But yeah, we'll certainly come to Ten Hag later because there's a lot to learn and a lot to take from his sort of tenure, especially in relation to us. And that goal was definitely offside. But we do need to talk Arsenal versus Liverpool. So we chatted on the instant reaction yesterday. I was feeling very sort of confused about where I was with that game because there was a lot of frustration for me, a lot of anger at the way we approached the game in certain ways and the way it played out, but also some pride and some real joy in some of the tactical stuff that happened and some of the decisions that were made and some of the performances. Bukayo Saka, oh my goodness me, we need to talk about him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird one to analyze. I think this morning I've kind of settled and I've come to more of a sort of base conclusion, which I'll come to from that game and maybe sort of become a bit more circumspect. But where are you at this morning? Because I know we were both feeling a little bruised yesterday.
Just hurt in the way it happened, but honestly, I'm very happy with where the team is at in general. I think that there are things I'd love to improve upon. There's things and tweaks that I'm always going to suggest that I feel that we can improve upon. But when you start to look at who started the match and who ended the match, it tells a story. In fact, even starting the match, it tells a story about where we're approaching this game. And, if we're going to sit there and say that Liverpool are title challengers, then I'm sorry, they didn't look it as far as I'm concerned. This is a Liverpool side who, for me, had a majority of who they wanted to start on the pitch. That wasn't the case with Arsenal. So you're starting at an advantage right now. And I have a look at that first half, and I thought we blew them out of the water. I'm sure we'll get into specifics, but I was very impressed. I thought it was one of our better performances of the season, ironically. I was expecting it because Mikel had talked about pre-match the team would be flying, and I felt like kudos, like it was. It was incredible. It was a very good first half, I would say. And then I think there's things to talk about in the second half, a little bit on us, not entirely on other things. But I felt this was more in the category of taken away from us as opposed to we lost it, which is where I'm okay losing. I don't think there's ever an okay way to lose, but I felt that there was a lot more stuff that we did right in terms of attempting to win. Structure was okay for most of the parts. I think that there was some things to talk about in the second half. I unfortunately do think the ref played a role in terms of how stop-start the tempo was. But, in terms of our structure and making sure that we were finding people in the right areas, we still had a period where we struggled with that. And I think that, ironically, I don't know if you had a chance to look back or you braved it, but the way that we conceded the second goal annoys me quite a bit. But it was brave. So I can't critique the team for lacking bravery in recent matches and then critique the moment that they were brave, because it's a moment where Miles and the team is pushing for another goal. and we get caught on a transition, which is going to happen against the Liverpool side who have one of the best outlets in world football still, right?
And one of the best passes in Premier League history.
Yes, from centre back.
You know,
so it's a combo that you're going...
And right back.
Yeah, and right back. Yeah. And so it's the perfect storm. And Mikel knows this. He's mentioned it in previous pods. So where I'm at, I am very proud of the team. I'm happy with where we're at. Even in terms of if I tried to bird's eye view it, I think under the circumstances, I'm happy. Now, I'm not happy with the manner, and we can talk about that as if we haven't talked about it, but I do still think that this team showed a significant level above Liverpool. I have no problem saying that. Like, I looked at it, and ironically, as much as I was upset about the result, I sat there and said, Liverpool aren't title challengers for me. And that could be a really rude statement to some people. People might think that I'm being arrogant, but simply I felt 11v11. I put my best against your best because I didn't even put my best. And I still felt like I controlled you. And that second half, if you have a chance to look back, for as much as we want to critique Arsenal for not being able to string together more attacking movements, Liverpool themselves didn't have very many instances where they troubled our keeper at all. And so for all the possession, I think that there was a lot more made of the field tilt numbers where, sure, they had possession, but you look at the physical shots, there weren't very many times that I felt stressed at goal, especially on the rewatch. Now, that moment in transition is an isolated moment, but it does come against what for me felt like the run of play for both teams. The ref, for as much as he stopped tempo, stopped it for Liverpool. As much as he stopped it for Arsenal. I think we didn't get the calls. But in terms of the stop-start nature of that second half, it was very difficult to gain any tempo on any opponent.
Yeah, I think I also feel a level of pride of what we did. Like, you know, we were a refereeing call away from winning that game 3-2, even with the players that we had on the pitch.
Yeah.
I think there's certain games that you come away from and you're like, there's a million things that are it's kind of splintering off in terms of, you know, what you feel about a certain moment or a player or a decision or whatever. This game, I think, has crystallized for me as a real line in the sand of we had 6 of our 9 senior defenders out by minute 74.
Yeah.
If we can't say that affects results... If you, I sort of said this on the instant reaction. I understand that there are two sides to this debate. There's a spectrum in terms of injuries. You can't, if Havertz was out and everyone else was fit, you can't be talking about injuries. You can't be. But you also can't say if the entire squad was out, you know, that it doesn't affect it. Like, there has to be some kind of middle ground. And if you're someone who's, you know, injuries aren't an excuse, we should be winning that game. What genuinely, if 6 out of our 9 senior fit defenders are not available, at what point do you say that is enough? Where? We have to say that is significantly affecting the game. And even with that, we still nearly won. In fact, we had the ball in the back of the net, I think rightly. So I feel that is my main takeaway from that game. And my huge, big takeaway sort of headline is get our players fit. We've not had enough players fit this season. That is a fact. And that's my takeaway from the game. We could pin it there. But I think there's a lot more to talk about in terms of the tactics as well. And I come back to what you were saying about Liverpool. They had 2 they had 4 high turnovers, but if you look on the map, there was 2 of them. I think it's on Mark's stats club. I looked at the data. It's like right out on the right wing. It doesn't count. One of the 2 high turnovers was Marino's mistake, and the other one I actually can't remember, but they had 2 high turnovers. Liverpool's entire game model is about forcing high turnovers. They got 2 against us with that defence, with that team, without Saliba, without Odegaard, with a half-fit Saka and Timber. Like, we have to look at the context, and I also look at other aspects of the tactical side of the game. I loved what we were doing with Havertz in the first half and sort of finding those spaces out wide and pulling McAllister. Rice, as we mentioned yesterday as well, receiving in the block, did so well. So there's so many positives to take. It's just hard to see the wood for the trees because of the result. It really is, and you know, we're obviously naturally quite positive fans. But I don't know how anyone can look at how many players were out by minute 74 and look at Kivior and Miles Lewis-Skelly up against arguably the best right winger in the world, and arguably potentially going to be, if he doesn't leave, the best right back in Premier League history, potentially. Both Trent and Salah could be in the Premier League all-time 11. Could be by the end of their careers. I'm not saying they are.
Yeah.
And they're up against Kivior or Miles Lewis-Skelly. Kivior could arguably be the 7th choice player in that position in terms of knock-on effects. Gabriel, Saliba, White, Calafiori, Timber. Could even put Rice in there. I think I'm missing someone as well. Whatever it is. If you're going that far down, we have to. It sounds like an excuse, but it's a fact. And I hate this thing of like you can't use injuries as an excuse. Yes, you can. Yes, you absolutely can.
Yeah, I think I was even saying in the instant reaction, like, we just need to get fit, mate. And
yeah, it's that simple for me.
Yeah, and there are times that, again, I felt Bournemouth, Shakhtar, I will critique the team when I feel as though that the team didn't do things correctly. And, there was moments in this game that I felt like, okay, maybe we could have had, I think I said in the instant reaction, we could have had the Jesus and Ethan Nwaneri sub a lot earlier, but 54th minute, Gabriel gone, boom. 74th minute, Timber gone, boom. You can't be changing a team, even if I want to see changes. I know if I'm a coach, I'm not making 4 changes to a starting 11 within 10 minutes of each other. So I can understand there to be a staggered approach to introduction here, because too much too soon in a vulnerable game state, 2-2, by the way, with that threat of transition, you need to bed players in, and you will be caught on the counter, which we were in the 80th minute, right? So I look at this and I sympathize more than I critique. And I think, just to get a little bit meta, maybe, in terms of why we feel this way, why do we feel like we can't say that there's an excuse? It's because there's a lot of people that have sat there, and I think underneath all of the acceptance of a project, it is reaching the point for a lot of Arsenal fans that they don't care and they need to see a win. And by a win, I don't mean a win against Liverpool or whatnot. They need to see a trophy, and a big trophy. It's getting to that point, and it's getting to the point where no matter what justification or the context that you use, it doesn't matter. That's it. I'm sorry. I will never do that again.
I liked it.
It doesn't matter. For some fans, at the back of their mind, it's okay, fine, you might be right, but at this point, it's how many years? At this point, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And the fact that we're facing a title rival, even without Rodri, Pep and title challenges don't go well. And you're sitting there and people are saying, well, it's 5 points off in October or in November. It's already over. This idea that we feel even 1 or 2 points means you won't win the title is its own stress. And then you culminate it with, I feel that when we talk process, and I know we joked with Ten Hag and we look around the league, much of our faith in this Arsenal project has been with an underlying belief there's a guarantee of trophy outcome. And I honestly feel if we saw this game in 22-23, the perspective of it would be very different. Insert this game in the exact point in the season, even with our brilliant form of not really dropping points in that run, we draw to Liverpool like that, I guarantee you everybody would sit there and say, well, with the injuries, that's a brilliant result. And so it's a very difficult thing, I think, to battle your inner demons about where you want the team to be ultimately with where you're at in the moment. And contextualizing those things in the moment, which plays on the red card, the Brightons, the Man City. When you talk about individual moments in the present, how do I deal with that disappointment knowing that I'm battling this beast, who, by the way, aren't the same beast? And I think that's what people are forgetting. And I don't feel that this title race is going to be like other ones. I mean, the fact that City, for me, a Rodri-less City, aren't the City of old. This Arsenal team with 6 out of 9 starting defenders, I'm sorry, they're not the Arsenal team of last season. Liverpool, for me, didn't look like the Liverpool of old. This title race will be new, and I think fans need to kind of accept it, where I personally don't think that the totals will be that high, mate, in terms of actual point tallies. And I think that's where people are going. So that's the struggle.
I think that's bang on. I'm just remembering that. Do you remember that? I think it was maybe 22 around then when Arteta was like, the thing is you can press Liverpool and then Van Dijk just plays a 50-yard pass to Salah. And you're like, just go away. Just please, you've been here for so long. I think Arteta actually said in his press conference pre the game, he was like, how do you beat Liverpool? And he's just said that because they've been at the top for 9 years, they know how to win. Like, you know, and this is another aspect of it. I think what you said is true in so many ways, massively in the macro, but also in the micro of this season. We're waiting for that moment. We all think, most Arsenal fans do know that we're good. We want that moment where the result tells us that. We want that moment. And I feel like in every, maybe Spurs is the closest because it was kind of coming from behind a little bit. I think Villa was a little bit too early in the season, but specifically against City and Liverpool, we haven't had that lift-off, that moment of we know we're good. We know we're good, but the result proves it. You know what I mean? That absolute sort of, I don't know, the take-off moment in the season. And I think we're still waiting for that. And even in the victories that we have had, I look back at like the Shakhtar game, it's like we won, but or like PSG, we had a brilliant first half and the second half wasn't quite, we haven't had that sort of barnstorming victory yet. And I think we're waiting for that. And I think that's part of what's under this, as well as everything you said as well. It's really hard to contextualize, and it's hard to know how to be a fan to this Arsenal team at the moment, where to support them, where to know. It's hard to know how to be a fan to this team when you almost feel like you're not seeing, you're waiting for something that you know is there, you think is there, but you haven't seen. You know, like maybe the last time we maybe felt that was that Chelsea game at the end of the last season. Yeah. I think we haven't really felt that lift off. And I think that's what fans are waiting for.
Well, the struggle, you know what, I kind of accepted this actually in the summer because I had a look at this Arsenal team and I thought, okay, what record have we not broken that year to not win it? And I kind of came at it from that angle. If you really want to talk about even lift-off points, last year Arsenal had the most points against the top six. The most points against title rivals. In terms of...
October, you beat City. Yeah. And it's like, boom. Here we go.
And so I feel like we've experienced those things, and I still feel that us as fans aren't there. And I've really had to...
But not this season. This is my point.
Yeah. Well, this season is tough because, I mean, I think our difficult period was in December last year. And I would argue our liftoff came in January, right? That's when we started beating teams 5-0, even within the season of last year, which everyone was really positive about the type of football that we were seeing. That liftoff didn't come until January, in which, we had easier fixtures. We did. Like, it was a point where we needed to maximize, but we did it in style. So it felt good. Now I'm having a look at the fixtures, and this is our most difficult part of the season. It just is. In terms of, the December period, we actually are pretty kind with fixtures. We're pretty kind in March. I think we pick up in April as well. We have a little bit more difficult of an April, but generally speaking, we're getting over the hump of difficult fixtures. And I don't think that we've seen this Arsenal team with this amount of injuries in a difficult moment not crumble and lose multiple on the bounce. And if you're trying to look for progress, a kind of green shoot of improvement, ultimately, that's what I take away from this season. And when you start to talk about lift-off points and things, I mean, you can't lift off without a fully fit team. We don't. No matter what you look at it, every season, when Arsenal were flying, even in 22-23, the first 19 games, how many major injuries did we have, mate? Xhaka at the end of November for a couple weeks?
That team didn't lose, did it?
No.
That team that we could all name from that season. Yeah.
No, when they started. So, I mean, again, if you apply the context to each of those different liftoff points, they don't do it. That team doesn't do it. And so to be there and to be within touching distance of, your rivals at this point, having had all of that, again, I think it's a very big testament to where this team has gone to. Now, it's going to be a constant push and pull all season, mate. I guarantee you. I remember saying this in the summer. I feel like every dropped point is going to feel like the end of an era, and we start questioning because there is an underlying part of fans that they may trust what they've seen. They don't trust the ability to get over the line. And that's a push and pull.
And fair enough, because we haven't done it. And I also think there's a kind of grass is greener thing where we know ourselves so well, and we know our benefits and our drawbacks, and we know our strengths and our weaknesses and everything. we see it's like it's the same in life, mate. You know, you think everyone else is having a great time and they're on Instagram and their stories lovely and they seem to always be on holiday and the next door neighbour's just bought a new car and everyone's better than you. It's not the case. It is not the case. City and Liverpool are flawed and have flaws and will drop points. Fact. We know that to be true. We also know that our neighbours aren't necessarily having a better life than us. It just may appear that way. But we're so familiar with our own issues and flaws that we hyper-focus on those, which I get. I'm not saying is a wrong thing to do. I just think it can skew it. And it makes it very hard to pitch it and know where we are. When you're winning games over and over again, it just feels like you're on a train. I'm on a train, I know where I'm going. And this team's going to win and win, and it's going to do that and do that and do that and do that. And unfortunately, it just never, ever works out like that. It's the same thing. It's kind of the FIFA thing of a player like on career mode, slightly weird analogy, will always improve. So if you have a player who's 60, by the end of your career mode, they could be a 70 overall, but they will have improved. You never go down. And it is that slight mentality of like, well, everything's just going to get better and better and better. There's going to be no challenges. This isn't going to happen. So it's very hard to know what should be taken seriously as a flaw and what should be, really questioned and where we should go, oh, this is a really, really genuine concern, and where we should be going, I think it's okay, we just need to trust. It's hard to know. It really is. And on that, we are not helped, let's say, by the refereeing. I genuinely want to park the conspiracy aspects of this. We've had that discussion. We'll continue to, whatever, but let's just talk about the incidents. I thought it was horrific. Genuinely horrific yesterday. Anthony Taylor, I mean, the Konate incident, I don't understand. I do not get how VAR isn't intervening. Firstly, how he doesn't give it in the first place. Then on the Premier League VAR match centre thing, they said that Konate won the ball, and it's like not even close to true. It's not. He doesn't touch it. Mental. We spoke about this on the instant reaction, the Kivior moment, where also when the ball's going in, isn't there a whole thing about you keep going?
Of course.
And so it's like if with the offside thing, like if it's a marginal offside, you keep going and then you check it. That seemingly didn't apply there. Maybe there's a rule there. I don't know. Like genuinely, I'm saying I don't know, but I don't understand why that was blown about 3 seconds after the Kivior thing when he's not looking at the Kivior thing. And he's saying, it was ages ago, it was the push from Kivior. It wasn't even a foul anyway. And then you're looking at other incidents, you're looking at the Virgil moment with Havertz. I don't get it. And then, then there's the other side of things, and you're looking at, I was seeing Liverpool fans last night on social media saying that they felt there was moments with Trossard or something. That I saw other people saying that. So there's always two sides to this. But yeah, I couldn't wrap my head around those. I could not.
I think the penalty for me is horrific. What is the threshold for a penalty? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I'm lost.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. And as far as the Kivior thing, I think I mentioned to people like the only offense you could maybe say is climbing. But I don't agree that he was doing it.
You have to let it play through. Well, and I don't think you agree, but you have to let it play through.
Yeah, 100%. And the referee made it about himself again. It's just another instance of that. Because it wasn't even just those instances. I felt, as far as even the fouls were going, the entirety of the second half, those 50-50 fouls were just utterly ridiculous. You could tell that the players were besides themselves about it. And at some point, we're so quick to criticize players. But, I'm very frustrated that off the pitch topics have gone into our analysis of this season. But it seems like we have to. I feel like every post-match reaction, there's something that is there and there to discuss and there to debate. And I think fundamentally it's wrong. I have a look at even how maybe the other side might feel. And I think Liverpool, whilst they received most of the fouls, I don't think from a coaching perspective, they would enjoy the stop-start nature against this Arsenal team looking for an equalizer, regardless of getting the fouls.
We scored from a set piece. So
well, exactly. And so I think it just, the product for me is the most important thing. And I don't understand why we're sitting there debating it. Like, forget who's right and who's wrong and defending your team and all of that aspect of it. Are you guys really telling me that this is the product that you want to see in terms of, I'm happy for it to go against us. If we're talking about consistency of application, I seriously am fine with it and accept it. But yeah, these things are becoming increasingly more difficult pills to swallow, I think. As more and more happens, I don't have very big analysis for you, mate. I don't know what a penalty is. I don't think that that's a foul. And I think that the second half performance of Anthony Taylor is shambolic, which is actually not being spoken about it as much as even those big flashpoints, because I think he is directly responsible for killing the momentum of the game. And I mean that not just as an Arsenal team. I mean that in terms of the tempo of the game. Mate, it was a beautifully poised game. I'm looking at
the management of the product.
Yeah, the first half, I felt like, ironically, I wasn't terribly angry, even though, of course, we had the flashpoint. But as a whole, I didn't feel that the tempo was stopped as much. I felt, and I don't have any stats to back this up, but I would love to see the amount of times that the ball was stopped due to a referee, the time that was, and I think it's an outlier in the season. I have not seen the ball stopped that often in a match for Arsenal, at least. I don't know about anybody else, but from an Arsenal perspective, it felt like the most time that the ball was stopped due to refereeing stoppages. And it's not a product that I think anybody wants to see.
Yeah, no, it certainly felt that way. And I think that the Champions League, this point about, or this doesn't happen in the Champions League, so it proves that the Premier League refs are rubbish. I think like if we spent more time with more incidents, and if we had 20 teams in England in the Champions League and we're playing as much as we do in the Premier League, I think we'd have a different conversation. But what we can see is referees who most of the time seem to get things right, and most of the time don't make it about themselves, manage the entertainment of the game way better. Let's not get tribal. We can go down that road if we like about Arsenal or whatever, but the point being, across no fan of any Premier League club is happy with the refereeing, which tells us something, I would suggest, about tribalism, but also tells us something about the entertainment of this game. And we've spoken about this before, like, we don't want games decided by these big incidents. We want things to be quickly, even that VAR check. Oh my God, guys.
Do you know what's really annoying is when you see even La Liga and the recent El Clasico, in which they're able to sit there and play
the semi-automated straight. Yeah.
And we don't help ourselves. I've told you, I've asked you, I need help as a foreign fan to understand why the PGMOL and has so much power. It's just not the case in American sports. Like, I hate to be like, ironically, for us, even if you're a really big fan of basketball, hockey, whatever it might be, the big personalities could be commentators or pundits, but it's never been about officiating. They never carry the revere or the power that this PGMOL seems to have on England as a whole. I don't know if that's the case in La Liga. Like, maybe it's a football thing, but I really don't think so. I don't see it. Maybe because I don't watch it as much. But I guess what I'm getting at is this whole idea that Howard Webb has pans to him in the stands.
Yeah.
Utterly ridiculous, let alone that he's got a headpiece. Yeah. Let's not even get into that. I'm not even talking.
Yeah.
Why do I need to pick Howard Webb out in the middle of a game? Why? And then why do I have, what's his name? Is it Gallagher, the older ref, who's been on Ref Watch before?
Dermot Gallagher, yeah.
Why is he as part of the punditry circle that is explaining things that don't explain the rules? Why not?
It's completely backwards.
So it's just
completely backwards.
Yeah, I actually don't understand why you guys have that much power given and where that got established either. Like, I'm struggling to see it.
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a cultural thing about. I think there's a sort of maybe a historical, maybe more of a hierarchical social system here, I guess, maybe, and sort of the class system and stuff has something to do with that. Maybe
was football in terms of the history not like a supposed gentleman's game in terms of how it was, but is that why? Like, is that like this idea that they're authority and you must respect authority, or something along those lines?
I think there's some of that, some kind of Victorian values and stuff from. I'm not a social historian, so I wouldn't want to say, but I think it's probably something to do with that. But I think the main point that you make is the point. They shouldn't have this much influence. We shouldn't know their names. They should be, and this is not to disrespect these people, but on the same level as groundsmen and the stadium announcers. They're there to support the product. They're not there to be the product. And it feels like they are at the moment. And we're not going to fix it on a podcast here, but I think I share the frustration that you have and many people have that something has to give. I don't know what it is. We could sit here and try and fix it. I'm not sure I'm the right person to do that. But the way we have it at the moment, with that amount of influence, with their say, with the games just becoming about the referees and what the referees are doing, every post-match analysis, what did the referees do, whatever, that can't be good for the product. It's not good for the product. And something needs to change. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, and I think it frustrates me because then I look at the game and I think there's actually a lot of interesting things that we did within the game. And I don't know if we've quite got into it, but
let's go there now.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I felt is I think this Liverpool team struggle with defending different defensive line heights. I said it post-match, I said it in the IR, and our first goal comes from a beautiful execution of exactly that principle. And I think while Ben White is definitely nursing and coming back from injury, the one thing that I think he's been able to remind a lot of people, and I remember highlighting, is his level.
So sorry to cut you, but just remembered, if a half-fit Ben White is one of our 3 defenders available.
Yeah. And but his level of distribution is really impressive, mate. I don't think he gets the praise enough for it, because I think his role has transitioned where that's less highlighted. But it doesn't mean that it's any less in his locker. And I look at him and I get a certain sense of calm. There was even moments that I felt within the first half that there was some nervy passes, but he seemed to be a moment and a beacon of calm. Yeah. You had mentioned the turnover from Marino, but he wasn't alone. I mean, there were some other people that were a little bit rushed, I felt. And he, for me, picks the right pass 9 times out of 10. Maybe it doesn't always come off, but the decision and where to hit and when to hit it is always correct. And so, exploiting that behind Liverpool, I think, is going to be key. I mean, they do have very good defenders as a center back partnership, but they don't track well. And I think a lot of people
saw that for the goal.
Yeah, and a lot of people actually critique the midfield for that. It is a center back issue. It's a transfer of responsibility. What this Liverpool team isn't able, and this is just me critiquing it, they are unable to transfer defensive duties. This Arsenal team are brilliant at it in terms of if a marker goes from a different zone, transferring that responsibility to the next person is something that this team has ironed out completely. It's why our press is so brilliant in terms of the shadow covers, in terms of people being able to support each other, in terms of Ben White being able to venture out of possession as like a high 8 and be that pressing trigger whilst being a 6, is because the changes in the back line allow us to do that, and we're able to support and adjust at different line heights. This Liverpool team weren't, for me, and it's something that they've struggled with quite a bit. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold gets drawn into the middle of the park. I think Martinelli, I'm upset that we didn't use him more, but Liverpool got smart. And they did make a change in the second half that I thought was very good in terms of putting Konate out there as opposed to Trent. And they basically asked Trent, you're going to have a free role. I'm not going to ask you to defend, which wasn't the case in the first half. There was a lot more of a traditional 4-3-3 there. Yeah. And here he moved into the middle of the park. And so that was an interesting change tactically for me. The one thing that I hope that Arsenal would do, I hate to keep banging this drum, but this idea of a connector and what you're going to get on the right-hand side of the pitch. So the first half, Bukayo, who, by the way, I think gasses out in the second half. You could clearly tell it had an issue there. But from the first half, at least, there is a level of tempo that we get from the wings with Bukayo that is unlike anything. So let's remove trying to replace that. But this idea of a tempo setter is something that this team needs in the final third. And we've got our tempo setter in the back in William Saliba, who is out. But we have those things with Ben White doing it. Declan coming back to the 6. I don't know if we have a Declan section. He could. The way that he played in the 6 was... He can.
That's 3 impressions so far on the pod, George.
Crazy.
You feeling all right?
I know. But he's been incredible in that position. So you've got a tempo setter in the middle third. I don't think that Havertz is a tempo setter. I think he's a facilitator. But a tempo setter isn't exactly the same thing. That's a high touch, being able to pass where and when. Havertz drops in to solve problems that arise depending on the situation, but he's not sitting there completing the rhythm in the final third. He's an integral part of how we achieve rhythm, but he's not setting it. And the person that sets the rhythm is the one that will add fluidity, that will add creativity, that will help our team not see moments where there's a half hour where we don't see a string of attacks, where there's a Bournemouth game. And so that's the thing that frustrates me. And I will end on it being Ethan. And at the expense of mixing so many different topics in this little random kind of ramble rather, the whole idea of what Miles was able to give us, I'm really tired of talking about this integration point. We need to start playing the problems that we see. And I think that's the one thing that I would critique Arsenal for in general. Again, less so in this match because we've got so many different substitutes and it's such a stop-start nature of the second half. But I do feel that when you're struggling to connect and you see, for example, Bukayo tiring, understandably, he's coming back from a hamstring injury. We need to not replace him, but we need to replace that quality, that impetus, that thing that he gave us about coming on the inside, being able to receive on the run, in tight spaces. Like that little pass from Thomas Partey, which Ben does quite a bit, that passes inside of midfield when he arrives from wide and Bukhayo's able to take it in stride. I look and I say, Ethan can do that. Ethan can do that. And, Bukayo can stick wide like that. And then by adding somebody like this, we sacrifice some defensive solidity, sure. But if you're already going to have people going forward, which is what we did, that's how we get done on the goal, then surely you lean into that philosophy. If you're already being brave, surely we have somebody that's able to put their foot on the ball. Surely we have somebody able that you trust at least to set the tempo. And I don't know why Jorginho, who's quietly not been talked about this season, hasn't been trusted as much. I think last season there was a point where when the game got stretched but we were winning, there was a sub that made sense in everyone's mind, and including Mikel's. Bring on Jorginho for 15, 20 minutes to put his foot on the ball and kill games. He's been very hesitant to do that this season. And I'm not sure why, but the theory should still apply. When the game gets stretched and so much with a basketball set nature and you're in the lead, I don't think adding more tacklers is the way to go when you've already got a team of tacklers that are on the pitch. It's about applying balance when you can. And Ethan, for me, can do it. You look at Miles, his composure, by the way, that moment, tweeted it out early before the pod here, that moment where 3 Liverpool players go to press him, who for me, David Raya gives him a hospital pass. It's not a good pass. And Salah looks at that and says, oh, I'm going to make a big moment here. It's 2-1. I'm going to get it. 3 Liverpool players converge. And mate, I don't know if you saw that video. It was very intentional. Miles, on the first touch, controls it, waits, press baits, goes to the Liverpool markers before releasing. That level of composure at the top of the box for a 17, 18-year-old, by the way. I don't care that you're 17 or 18. That's quality. That is a level of game-breaking quality where they've killed the press and Declan's off. And you need a bit of that in the final third. I was seeing it in deeper build-up in moments. I wasn't seeing it in the final third and the middle third. And by the way, it doesn't just have to come from the 17 or 18-year-old, but just factually, they're one of the better tight-spaced dribblers in the squad, despite their young age. I'm sorry if that makes people uncomfortable. Miles and Ethan are some of the best tight-spaced dribblers in the squad. Period, end of story. You've got Saka, Odegaard. Beyond those two, the teenagers become our most influential tight-spaced dribblers. Unless you want to talk about Gabriel Jesus, who in the first 5 yards is excellent but can't maintain it. These kids can. So it's a quality that not only do we need tempo, but if you're going to make it a basketball game, get your best carriers on the pitch. If you're going to lean into that, get your best carriers on the pitch. Let them carry. So that's probably my only frustration in this match, really, with it. I feel that we really could have done a little bit more in terms of giving our carriers some more impetus in the final third.
Quite a lot to pick through there. Yeah, I mean, going back, I think I think you started on Ben White, and I think it's important to highlight him because I think I used the phrase passing menu, which I came up with. I quite like. I want to use again. I think it's really nice to say he's almost simultaneously like light and dark. Like he seems to have this sort of fleet of footedness and has this ability to sort of to play as that right back and to do what he does with Saka and supporting him on the overlap, but also has the strength and stability to duel with anyone. And it's such a rare physical attribute. And then we saw, I think, with the passing menu, what he was able to do. And I really loved how he used the spaces in behind the fullback. So I think that was I think it's important to highlight that. I think on your point about tempo setters in the final third, I think that is Bukayo and Ødegaard, and obviously who sort of share that responsibility. And I think we would have had that was the theory in sort of in the first half. And I think because of Saka's fitness issues, I think that's the reason that kind of went off. And then I would agree that it's got to be an Ethan or someone. But I actually think in terms of connect, because I agree about that final third, I think that would have been Ethan. But I actually do feel, and I've got a data viz that sort of backs this up. Rice, Trossard, Marino, and Martinelli. I don't know exactly how they've done it, but this is on Mark Stats, it's progression via carry. Curtis Jones is the closest to them in terms of carries in this game. It's progression via carry 1.0. I've got the viz. You can find it on. I'll tweet it out. It's ball progression based on fields gained. I don't quite know how they do that, but certainly they're the most progressive players. And I did feel that in the sort of the connecting aspect of that, I thought we were okay. I agree on the tempo setting in the final third, I think, on Ethan, but I think in terms of carries through the middle, because of the spaces that Liverpool had, because of the reason, because of Van Dijk and Konate, who I think it's ego that they don't step up and support their midfield. I think they just want those big spaces to work in because they know they can hit those balls and they're fine. They don't necessarily want to work back. I felt we were okay. I felt we did actually get through them, but I do agree on your point in terms of the final third and setting the tempo. And I felt that could and should have been Ethan and should have been throughout the season. Yeah.
And I don't know, like I'd have to see their carries, but it felt like for me, it was all wide. I wasn't looking at us breaking through the middle as much. And maybe I'd have to go back to see, but I felt like a lot of those carries, for example, they were Martinelli bringing it from like R18 out wide, then recycling. And Trossard performed that function as well.
Potentially, yeah.
And maybe...
Potentially, I need to look.
Yeah, maybe Declan had probably the most central carries out of our midfielders. So, maybe there's something to speak about there. It's just, I think that the tempo in the final third is something where we've seen enough sample in 3 or 4 games that this Arsenal team without Martin Ødegaard and a fit Bukayo Saka will struggle to keep the play in the final third it for extended periods of time. It could be 10, 15 minutes at a time. And I do feel that when you're talking about trust, I don't want to hear a trust point. When I see Mikel put a youngster in over some experienced pros in a game state that was in the balance for 20 minutes. And his first instinct, by the way, wasn't to put Zinchenko, who has had a couple training sessions. I know he's been out for quite a while. The decision to do that was pretty pointed for me. And definitely wouldn't have been the case last year. And so from a trust angle, I think that's as trusting as it can get. I mean, what's bigger than Liverpool at home with 20 minutes left in what is a deciding game state of 2-1, right? Like it's as big as the trust can go. So I hate that we have to curtail our analysis to what would Mikel do here. And the debate is trust on integration, right? I think the reason why people aren't as hard on the Ethan thing is because there's a part of us that just feels, well, Mikel won't do it. So I'm not going to breathe life into what that could look like. I'm not saying you, but I think that general, like there's a lot of people that do that. Even if we do lineups, right? And there's people missing. There's this whole debate.
Yeah, there's a kind of, well, Mikel won't do it, so let's not talk about it.
I get so you can't breathe life into what those hypotheticals could look like. But it becomes, we'll see. We'll see how the season pans out. I do think that we'll look back on these last couple of weeks or month and a half and believe that we could have done a better job of replacing Martin Ødegaard with Ethan and that integration in general. I'm sure Ethan will garner enough minutes. I'm sure that we'll have another 10, 15-minute cameos. I'm sure we'll get the odd start in a cup from Ethan. But I guarantee you, come January, we'll look back on this 4-month sample and we'll say, okay, we're approaching the title run-in. I don't know if I really want Ethan, but maybe we could have given him more minutes at the beginning of the season to get him ready and become more of an option for something that's going to be a little bit more difficult later on. So that's just the balance that we might have to strike in the future, I think. Because if we do find another point when we're 20, 30 minutes without really testing the goal, that's something that we can look at Arsenal about. We've talked on this pod about how things that we can't talk about, but really this is us. This is something that we can fix in general. And maybe it's not Ethan. Maybe you're sitting there, you're saying, and you're listening to the pod and you're thinking, okay, well, why can't we find that in other players? Which I'm open to, but I think whether it's Jorginho, which is why I bring up that one point from before, with an older head who puts his foot on the ball, or even an Ethan, there needs to be a better balance when you're seeing connection issues to have more people that want high touch, receiving in tight spaces, and can find a man consistently. And we can just keep a hold of the ball and kill momentum in certain aspects. Doesn't mean that you eliminate the transition nature or the false transitions that you're making. Just strike a better balance so that it doesn't become 20, 30 minutes of one game state versus another.
And I think that can explain certain aspects of yesterday and of the Bournemouth game as well, that sort of opening half an hour. Something about the balance is off. I would put. I think we probably felt we could get through the Ødegaard thing through giving more responsibility to Saka, which frankly we can. But when he goes off or when he's losing power a little bit, I think there's certainly a conversation to be had. I didn't feel the sort of sucking the ball up the pitch was the issue yesterday personally, but I do really strongly feel that thing, sort of tempo setting in the final third, and also a player who can receive between the lines centrally. I do feel we missed that, especially if Rice is going to be deeper and Rice can play those sorts of passes. Also, if we're going to have Ben White centrally, which I'd quite like to talk about. I think we can find players between the lines, and that should be an Ethan and can be an Ethan.
Do you know what's really frustrating for me? Like really quickly, it's that dereliction of responsibility that we have Kai Havertz dropping out of his central striking zone to attack the box to provide those facilitations. So he goes out wide of the pivot. It's what creates our first goal. But he's been asked to play more right wing than he has striker in the last 3-4 games by nature of basically trying to move people inside. And my question is, I would rather the Kai Havertz attack the box and carry that threat so that we can carry both a horizontal stretch as well as a vertical stretch. And so with Kai doing it right now, we lack another person that's centrally able to stretch the center back pair effectively. And by asking Kai to do it horizontally, which is fine, you limit your team. And the ultimate stretch is when you have it both vertically and horizontally. That's how you create the most stretch in the middle of the park. Take a circle, stretch it vertically, you get an oval. So yeah, you'll have that vertical space, but the wings will be isolated. Now, take another circle and you stretch it at the horizontal ends. Again, the middle third will have a lot of space, but then the final third and your back line won't have as much space. So in order to really do it, you've got to stretch equally in the same direction to maximize your influence of space. Really simple. And I just don't feel that we're maximizing that quite right now. So with the introduction of Ethan, it's not even just that he's got the quality of tempo for me, but it's that also macro thing that he can stretch wide, allowing Kai to stretch high, which means the team opens up as a whole. Now you can achieve this same thing with Jorginho. So if Kai is the one that's stretching wide to the right wing, why does Jorginho do this? Because from deep, he's got a brilliant ball over the top. And so he, from a different area, is stretching the pitch vertically for Arsenal with his introduction. So I think this concept of stretching the pitch, both wide and vertically, can happen with different means. It doesn't just have to be a carry through the middle of the park. It can be through passing. But you need effective stretchers both horizontally and vertically if you're going to want space in the center of the park to move.
Your dog agrees. Let's come to some questions. I think there's probably some other stuff about Saka in the game, probably some stuff about Rice, probably some stuff about Havertz, incidents, Partey, the goals themselves with this set piece, sort of repeating itself twice and getting it the second time. There's loads of stuff to talk about, but we obviously are limited for time a little bit. But let's see if we can come to some questions. Let's start with Dan Bryan on the Discord, who says, what do you make of the Mark Goldbridge analysis that Liverpool have a better squad than us and have better know-how, maybe? Not that he was knocking Arsenal, but has said we are punching above our weight with the team we have. I like him for some things, but his football analysis is terrible sometimes, says Dan. I don't know quite how you judge this. It's very difficult to say. I think like a better squad, you can throw that around. You have to quantify it. And I think ultimately players, you can see a squad looking, mid-table, but the right manager comes in and they're title challengers. So are they better players, or it's difficult to say. I think just individual talent-wise, I think Liverpool have higher flashpoints than us, maybe. Like I think like just pure on the ball talent, we don't have a Trent. I think just pure consistency, like GOAT Premier League players, we don't have a Virgil or a Salah yet. But I think there's certain players on our team who can get there. But I think across the squad, in terms of footballers, pure ability, players that I'd want, also from a mental perspective, from a physical perspective, I think we have a better squad. I think there's probably like, as I say, flashpoints where Liverpool are higher. Maybe higher peaks in certain areas of their pitch and what people have done in the game. But I prefer our squad and also the attitude of our squad. I think if you look at, I do feel, especially with Virgil and Konate yesterday, and also with Trent a little bit, you can see an attitude, you can see a bit of a, we think we're very good. And they're brilliant defenders. But I don't think, I can't see them sacrificing themselves for the team. I can't see, and maybe he shouldn't, by the way, but I can't, you're asking me what I prefer. I can't see a Trent doing what Ben White does sacrificially for the team. You watch what Ben White did yesterday in terms of what the ability that he has on the ball. If he had Trent's attitude, he'd be saying, I need to go and play for Liverpool or Chelsea, whatever, play centre-back and play those raking passes so everyone knows how good I am. No, he's happy to go, do you know what, I'll stand on the touchline, I'll do the right thing, I'll go and support Saka, and I'll go and do an interview with Ben Foster and say Saka's way better than me. No, mate, like you are an elite football player. And I think personality-wise, we've built a team of players who I feel are much more in that vein, which I prefer. So better squad is a very hard thing to say, but that's probably where I am with it.
I will be really vehement. They definitely not a better squad. I will hand on. I think the first half told the story. And I think that, again, I walked out of the pitch saying we're 100% better than these. What I do think that they have are more presently world-class winners who have won.
Yep.
Alisson, Trent, Van Dijk, Salah. For, again, arguable EPL greats in their team. That's it. But Arsenal have far more players that could be world-class. Like, I would argue, okay, in our 11, you've got Declan Rice, you've got William Saliba and Bukayo Saka.
They are all world-class.
They're all world-class without a doubt, right? How many of those have won? None.
But the oldest there is 25.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. It's not a knock, by the way. It's not a criticism, but it's just...
No, I'm not saying you won't.
It's like, it's the different scope. So when you look at Arsenal's flashpoints, and you might say, why aren't our flashpoints as great? I mean, you've got players that have sat there, perfected their craft, are in their prime, have won whilst doing their craft. So they've got a personality and they know who they are. I do think Salah's there. I do think Saka's there. I actually look at that as a very equivalent match, especially the way Saka's been playing this season. He's been the best forward in the league. There's a shout for the world, but he is the best playing forward in the league right now. And so, and I would argue William Saliba's consistency in terms of what he's given Arsenal. You look at the stats about our percentage of wins with him in the team, right? Like, he's there. I think Declan as a midfield presence as a 6, but we haven't seen Declan as a 6 this season.
If we see more irony,
of it, I think him there, he'll be there. But again, these are all players that haven't won. So that's really my analysis. There's a more present-minded, world-class winners in Liverpool. But I think as a squad, we're far more talented. I think that across the pitch, we've got more depth, by the way. I think that we're a far better unit in terms of both out of possession and in possession. Liverpool do rely on moments. They do. It's that raking pass from Van Dijk to hit Salah, who's going to go and do something special. It's that raking pass from Trent Alexander-Arnold to hit a Nunez. it's individual quality. It's not to say that that's bad, but it is a little bit more of an individualistic benefit. We are a much better team, in my opinion.
Do you agree on the attitude thing as well? Because I'd much prefer our type of personalities, honestly.
100%. Like, in terms of what you can achieve, you achieve more with that type of personality.
I agree, especially in the modern game.
Yeah.
We're also better looking, so. Let's come to a question on X from Mikel. I'm presuming that isn't the Mikel, but if you're listening, Mikel, hello. Can I have a job, please? I think we are by far the best team of the top three. If Liverpool or City had half of our unlucky decisions, fixtures and injuries, they wouldn't survive. A big signing in January and we secure the title. I think we've kind of discussed the first aspect of that, but January, we are approaching November. We are going to have to talk about transfers again at some point. I feel we're at a point now where it has to be the right player. And I think we've been there for a while. And obviously, what do you mean? It has to be the right player every time. But I mean, like, I think we're at the City point where we're willing to wait. And I look at someone like an Alexander Isak, and I go, or Sheshko, and I think we basically say, I think we can win. I think we can win the title with this squad. I think we can win the title with 2 or 3 out of this squad. Genuinely, I think we're good enough to win it. I just feel we're at a point where if we can get you, we have 2 or 3 players in that sort of position. If we can get you, we go and do that. But I think we have the squad to go and do it now. So in January, if that's doable, then let's do it. If we think that's the right time to do it, we think there's a contract running down or there's a special situation that's occurred, I'm happy to do it. But I don't look at this squad and go, we can't win the league without a signing in January. It might make fans feel more comfortable. It might give us a boost. But I think for me, all that stuff is kind of tertiary and secondary. The primary thing is the money. And if we're going to go and spend loads of money, which we don't need to, it doesn't get us any closer to our goal. Or it doesn't stop us getting to our goal, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
God, I'm so between 2 ends with this question.
Or do we go sign Vinny Jr. and just,
No, like, I agree with your point that it has to be the right player. My problem is I feel that we've left so much to do. For me, if
so much, really,
I do. So think about it. Where Sterling, unless you're thinking Sterling's a major thing, I think we need 2 forwards. I've always felt like we needed a marquee and we needed a versatile forward because I don't see Nelson as staying. I don't see Sterling as staying. I don't see Jesus as somebody that we really want to put faith in the squad. I see 2 forward holes. I see 1 hole as a 6'8", with Jorginho leaving, and Partey, by the way, who still hasn't signed on. So that's potentially 2, with Lukonga going. So guaranteed we need a 6'8" there. Our number 2 goalkeeper is somebody that we need. Neto is, again, alone. That's number 4. I do think that we need a Saliba backup as a defender. Been saying it from last season. Feel that we need it. And then you start to go into who could be leaving as a left back. Kieran Tierney, Zinchenko, last year of his contract. Tomiyasu, question marks about whether or not you trust that availability long term. So there's another defender there. I'm looking at 5 to 6 signings that I would like to see. And only one of those are potentially upgrades from people that I don't trust, as in Tomiyasu. There's 4, 5 minimum we need because of people that we lack
to win the league.
To win the league, you probably need a marquee forward. But in terms of the squad and what's leaving, Jorginho, Partey's leaving. The goalkeeper number 2 is not something that's signed on. Raheem Sterling's not signed on. We need that versatile forward. We already needed the marquee forward from before. I don't think we ever fixed that. But there's people leaving the squad that we're definitely going to need to replace. And that's just to maintain our level. But to win the league, we need maybe 1 special player. That can come from a 6'8" position in midfield if you want it to. It can come from the forward areas, either through left wing or a striker or whatever you want, but a real marquee forward. I think 1 player can make us the difference to win the league. But I don't think people realize we're losing a lot of players in the summer.
My position's always been, I think there's a player out there that guarantees us the league.
Mm-hmm.
but I still think we can win it without them. And I don't know. I think I've been quite pessimistic on the outgoings. I think that is always going to be happening. There's always going to be some squad turnover. So I think this idea. I don't know if this is what you're saying, but I think maybe people who would agree with you might be saying, yeah, we've left ourselves short or something. I think there's always a degree to which that there is going to be some turnover. I suspect Partey might stick around. I think you could keep Reece on as that, because we've also signed an extension with him. You could keep him on as that sort of fifth or sixth attacker. I think I don't necessarily agree on the Saliba one. I think we can cover that with what we have. I think there might be a fifth or sixth defender. I probably agree with you on the backup goalkeeper, but I don't see these as big things. Those are just natural turnover in squad that happens. The only big hole I see is that marquee forward. The players who are 18th, 19th, 20th in your squad, that they're always going to be slightly churning, and that's kind of fine. I don't see it as an issue. Them?
Because I feel like
I'm not saying you do, but the question was about what we need to do to win a title, and I think the guaranteed title, we've always been on the same page about that in terms of that big marquee forward. But I don't think I don't know, maybe you're not saying this, but it sounds like you're saying we sort of left ourselves short, we haven't done the right stuff. I think we're just in a natural position that every team is in. I'm sure you could look at Liverpool and say there's things that they need to do, in City, there's always going to be stuff you need to do. But I think there's only one that I'd say is in our first 12, 13 that I would look at as a position that we need to fulfill.
No, I think what I do think that we left ourselves short, but I've said that since the summer, because I think we're on the same page with that. That's like the marquee forward that we need to say. Yeah. So in that sense, yeah. But I do think that there's a lot of squad turnover that we've left that we're not anticipating here in the squad generally, which wasn't the case last summer. I mean, Partey could be a question mark, right? But Jorginho is definitely leaving, and that needs replacing in the squad as an option. I maintain the Sterling and Reece Nelson point, the sixth attacker we will need. And that's even before getting into the Jesus expenditure that we both have said could be a misuse of funds. I don't know what we're going to do with that, but ignoring him, because you lose him, that's 3 attackers in your fold. Minimum you need is 2 to replace it. And then number 2 goalkeeper, again, another thing that we haven't signed. Neto is a loan as well. Again, I think the defender is more of a want, but the left back isn't for me. I mean, Kieran Tierney's going. Zinchenko's in the last year of his contract. I don't want him to go down to a free, and I don't see a place in the squad for him. So, I mean, I'd have him going, and so, with 2 left backs going, you certainly need a fullback. If you don't want it to be at left back and you want to promote Miles, we definitely need another fullback for me, unless you want to trust Tomiyasu again. And that's another question.
Well, Zinchenko has another year. I think. Are
you saying he a year and a half in January? I think he's 2026, isn't he?
Yeah. But you said he's in his last year. So
for the summer,
I think. Sure. Okay. Sure. I think. I mean, do you think this is a specifically a flashpoint of squad turnover this summer? This summer coming. Is that what you're saying?
There's a lot of people, I think, that we want to turn.
You're saying more than normal.
No, I don't think more than normal, but I mean, I think maybe. I mean, in midfield, actually. I mean, because that's something that we didn't do last year, or we didn't expect. We bridged the Jorginho Partey debate. We parked it one season, right? We extended Jorginho, and we all said we are all surprised about Thomas Partey's form, but we all said he would be leaving in 2025. Along with Jorginho. So that was always a hole that we marked in 2025 for me that was going to come that wasn't in the summer for me. And we all said that we needed that. The marquee forward is always something that we've needed. I thought the number 2 goalkeeper we would have solved this year. We didn't. We got a loan. We band-aided that solution. Then the versatile forward, we did the same thing. We sent Reece out, which I don't think we trust Reece to stay and do it. If you want that and you're saying that, then fine, maybe you only need 1 forward, but I don't quite agree. I think that we're going to ask for another 6th versatile attacker. I mean, Sterling's alone, so he's not there. So I think we've got, at minimum, there's 4 to 5 guaranteed signings that we've got to make between January and the summer.
what I push back on is the idea that that's not normal. I do think that's, and I actually would say relatively it's more, but like just think about who left last year: Smith Rowe, Nketiah, Ramsdale, Vieira, El Neni, Nuno went out on loan, Carl Hein went, Reece Nelson, and so on and so forth. Like I think Cedric left. Like there's always going to be some sort of turnover. The question is where it's happening in the squad. Stuff like second goalkeepers, that's always going to be slight, unless you're Stefan Ortega at the best club in the world. It's always going to be slightly turning, and stuff like that. Your sixth attack, it's always going to be slightly turning. So I don't personally, I don't see this as a particularly
well. How about in the summer?
Bad period. I think it's quite.
How many signings do you think?
I think it's quite stable. I don't know.
In the next two windows,
know.
like what do you see as like definitely we need to get done? Let's say in the next two windows.
I don't know, but I suppose the point of difference is maybe about that this is a sort of a flashpoint of a particularly a big amount of squad turnover, which I don't really see. But I think okay, so 100%. I think we're both agreed on that marquee forward, 100%. But then beyond that, there's a lot of kind of relative questions. It's like, well, do we try and make Neto a permanent, or do we, with Tomiyasu, can he get over his fitness? There's a lot of sort of questions to be answered. But there's always questions. If we were sat here last year on the podcast, we were sat here talking about Smith Rowe's future and Vieira, and we're sat here about, what's happening. Are we going to give so and so another year on the contract? Nelson, whatever. So I don't think it's a particularly bad time. I think we're actually probably the most stable we've been for quite a while, if you accept that there will always be a little bit of turnover, especially in those sort of 15 to 23.
I agree with that. We're in the most stable position we've been, but let's put it this way. From this summer, what I felt like we should have solved was the marquee forward. That was...
Agree on that. 100%.
So that's carryover into next summer that I wasn't planning for.
Yeah.
Number 2 goalkeeper, I thought we would solve and buy. We just band-aided that solution. And then by making the decision to loan Reece, I thought that a versatile forward is something that's coming. It wasn't a necessary summer buy, but it was definitely something coming. I bookmarked summer 2025. We needed a versatile forward in there. Then I had a look at the left back situation, and Kieran Tierney's going. Zinchenko in the last year of his contract not doing it. That's a position that cropped up in terms of needing something. And even if I got Calafiori, I always felt like, okay, I need an overlapping left back profile eventually. So 2 of those positions were definite carryover from the summer that we could have done, in my opinion, being the forward and the number 2 goalkeeper. And then the versatile forward and a fullback were things that I wanted, but said, okay, 2025 could be something that we address those things. And then I looked at the 6'8" position and I felt like, okay, that's also a future problem. So there was 3 future positions that I was like, I'm fine as long as we get the forward and the number 2 goalkeeper done in the summer, because I can have 2 to 3. I would like us personally to get to a point that our summer windows are 2 to 3 players, not 5 players. I think that's a big turnover. I guess that's what I say in general.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe that's where we then disagree. I think you're never going to do that. I think you're always going to have 2 or 3 main players, and then there's going to be a bit of churn. I mean, I suppose just to return to the question to finish this off, do you think we need to bring anything forward to January to in order to avoid that situation that you fear that we're going to have in the summer?
More to just help us in the summer. Not that we need it to win the title, but the fact that you have 5 things that you need to do amongst a bunch of different departures, I feel solve 1 or 2 in the January. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be things that we carry forward. So like, for example, not saying to do this, although I would love it, Alphonso Davies, work a pre-contract agreement, for example. You have a hole there. I don't need it to come now. I'm not saying that we need 5 signings to go on and win the title in May. That's not what I'm saying. But I see holes coming up. So I'd like us to do stuff in January. At the very least, the ideal is if it helps you win the title, but I don't think it's necessary to. I do want us to do something because I see a lot of business that we have to do in the summer.
Sure, I hear you. And I suppose maybe our point of difference is whether that's natural and whether it is a lot of business relative. And I personally think there's 1 or 2 major things, and then you're always going to have some minor stuff going on. So that wouldn't force me to do something sooner in January. But we'll see what we do. Let's come to a final question, George. Bit of a spicy one from Ash11 on the Discord, who says, did the Liverpool game expose Martinelli's limitations all over again?
I've seen this question come up a lot. It's not even just on Discord, but even in on X and our use of Martinelli. I don't know why this is exposing. I mean, I think Konate is one of the better defenders in the league. So
he's so strong.
I mean, would you say, like, I don't know, Marcus Rashford or a top forward like Salah losing out to Gabriel? Does that make Salah ineffective? I don't think so. Like, there's moments that I felt Gabriel snuffed Salah out of the game. I mean, I don't think he really had a moment until that flashpoint in behind Miles, right? So from that perspective, I mean, Salah was quite ineffective until that moment. And so I just think this is a case of good player meets good player. And the defender won the battle. The attacker lost the battle. I think that Martinelli's had a very underrated start to the season. And maybe there's a bigger thing to talk about in terms of like what Martinelli is and his role and whatnot. That's another conversation. But in terms of this specific moment, I don't think that there was any flaws that got exposed. I think the one thing that I would say is that, we need to use the left side better in our function of that and the chemistry of it. But I think that's not really a Martinelli problem.
Yeah, it's down to what we expect from Martinelli. You've got to be aware what you're trying to judge him against and who against and by what metrics and values. And, it's a complicated conversation. We'll finish there. Thank you, George, as always. Thank you guys for your questions on Discord and on X. We've got 2 instant reactions coming out this week after the Preston game. I didn't talk about the Preston game. And the game on Saturday against Newcastle. We'll be back for those. We've also got a brand new data pod launching this week, so make sure you're tuned in for that. And of course, the Cannon Pod live on Thursday. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you being here. Make sure you drop your feedback and so on in the comments. If you want to join us over on Patreon and YouTube memberships, you can. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir.
Thanks for watching and listening. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.